Do I believe in coincidence? You know, I don't know. I don't know. A lot of people were just fed up. It wasn't just my grandfather. I mean, this case could have involved anyone at that time. It just so happened it was him on that day, and the rest is history. My grandfather, Boyzie, was a commercial fisherman here at the Keweenaw Bay Indian community, and he'd set his gill nets out in the bay. He'd sell fish, but he would also give people fish. He was a good man. He would take kids into the house that needed a place to stay, always willing to share what he had or what he knew. On June 1st, 1965, my father and my grandfather were coming back to shore after lifting their nets, and they had 4 lake trout that were bycatch in the net. At that time, the state was putting a lot of pressure on tribal fishermen and had regulations that they expected the tribal members to follow. Knowing that, my grandfather instructed my father to hide the lake trout underneath the net boxes. A conservation officer with the state of Michigan was on shore. My grandfather hopped out and had my dad pull the boat onto shore. When it hit the sand, the net boxes slid forward, revealing the 4 lake trout that were there, and Officer Beach saw them. And so he said, well, you know, Boyzie, you're not supposed to have lake trout now, it's out of season. My grandfather said that he wasn't because of the treaty rights that we have. In the treaty itself, the Lake Superior Ojibwe ceded millions of acres of land to the federal government, and in doing that, we also retained the right to hunt, fish, and gather in the ceded lands. The treaty rights are so important to our people because it allows us to maintain our identity, to feed our people, and to also gather medicines to make sure that we stay healthy. Because up until that point, we lived off the land. But so much of that knowledge was severed. Specifically here in Keweenaw Bay, we got hit pretty hard. My grandparents could speak Ojibwe, but they refused to teach my father and my aunts and uncles to protect them, because if you had a bunch of kids growing up speaking Ojibwe and spearing fish and out in the woods and harvesting all these things, the state and the federal government would say, oh, well, we still have an Indian problem here. I don't think anyone wanted their children taken out of the home, sent to boarding schools. For the most part, we would try to conform. My grandfather, when he got arrested, he wasn't targeting lake trout. You know, he wasn't trying to fish out of season. But when it was challenged, I think is when he finally stood up and said enough is enough and took it to court. And eventually made its way all the way up to the Supreme Court of Michigan, which was decided in favor of my grandfather in 1971. When we retained those rights to hunt, fish, and gather, it also included the ability to fish in Lake Superior. Our culture is integrated into the land. Our stories are all about the land and the beings here in the Maniduk, and being able to interact and maintain that relationship with the forest, with the water, with the fish, with the animals is imperative to our identity. We have stories associated with all of them. We have ceremonies associated with all those things. And if you take those rights away, you take away our ability to be Ojibwe people. For me, personally, it's trying to pick up all of those pieces that were left, just scattered around. You know, there's some that are really good with the language. There's some that are really good with the birch bark. And as we, slowly pick up those pieces, we can start forming our culture again in a much more substantial way. My kids have gone ricing every year since they were born. They've been sugaring since they were itty-bitty, gathering plants, and they're really good in the woods. So all those things are really important for cultural revitalization, but they wouldn't be possible if we didn't have people like my grandfather that challenged the system to say that, no, we have these rights and we're gonna use them. To kind of honor those people, those Ogichidaa that have come before, I think it's our responsibility to maintain these things now and to pass them on.